As a novelist, I am not someone who picks a topic, researches it, and then writes a book. What I like to do is to pick a topic that is grounded in an area that I have a long-standing interest in already. As some of you know, my first novel, Rules of Civility, takes place in New York in 1938. Well, I did no research for that book because I have a long-standing interest in the 1920s and 30s. Beginning as a teenager, I watched the movies, I read the novels, I studied the art movements, I listened to the music, and it was that long-standing interest in the period as a fan that I used as the foundation for inventing my version of New York in 1938. It was similar in the case of Gentleman Moscow. Again, dating back to my teen years, my interest goes back that far and began, as for many Americans, with the great Russian novels of the 19th century. I think the first novelist I read was Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment, but that quickly led me through the incredible constellation of writers of 19th century Russia, from Tolstoy to Turgenev to Gogol, ultimately to Chekhov at the end of the century. From there, my interest went on to studying the avant-garde of Russia in pre-war Russia, figures like Nijinsky, who reinvented the way we think of modern dance, Kandinsky, who reinvented the way we think of painting, Malevich, who reinvented in many ways the way we think of poetry. So there was a very robust avant-garde in Russia before the revolution that caught my eye. And then eventually I began to study the Soviet era, both the writers and the events. And that's the foundation, again, that I used to invent A Gentleman in Moscow, the world of A Gentleman in Moscow. Again, I did no research when I wrote A Gentleman in Moscow until I had finished the first draft. When I set out to write the book and I had decided it was going to take place in the Metropole Hotel, I had never spent a night in the hotel. And in my whole life, I'd only been in Russia for about 8 days. I don't speak Russian. I didn't study Russian history in school. But having this long-standing interest in the literature that led me to sort of an investigation of Russian culture, I used that to invent the story, knowing that once the first draft was complete, that then I would go and do some applied research to sharpen facts and look at some details more closely. And now why do I do that? Why do I start with a first draft without research and then do research at the end? It's principally because my instinct is that research can get in the way of the most important aspects of narrative writing, which is really to bring the characters to life, to allow their sentiments and their ideas to be expressed fully for the reader, to have the spaces in the environments, the bit characters, all vivid and three-dimensional for the reader. And I think to create a world that feels that alive and to have characters who are that vibrant for the reader, it is dangerous to do the research first, because you start to put in all these objects and elements of the past, which almost become like bricks in between the reader and the lives of the characters. So I like to start with the invention, get everybody alive and running around, and only when I'm done with the first draft to then go and do some of the applied research. So in the case of Gentleman in Moscow, I knew that when I started, I was going to eventually spend 7 or 8 nights in the hotel, but I would do it as soon as I finished the first draft. And that's what I did. As soon as I was done with the first draft, I flew from New York to Moscow, and I spent a little bit more than a week in the Metropole Hotel, where I began to revise the book and to look more closely at the reality of Russia through a personal visit and through some more historical work.